$150. We don't serve beggars here. My sister's voice sliced through the bank lobby, every head turning, while I stood there with my withdrawal slip trembling in my hand. I didn't fight back. Not yet. No, this story doesn't start at that counter. It starts on a gray Portland morning, the air cold enough to sting, when I opened a small wooden box my grandfather left me, a box marked, "For the kindest one." Inside was a key, and a truth I'd ignored for years. That day, humiliation felt final, but the next day I learned power can whisper louder than pride. I grew up in a house where love was measured by achievement. My father, Robert, believed affection should be earned preferably with a six-figure paycheck. My mother, Elaine, was no softer. She spent her life protecting the family's image like it was an heirloom vase that couldn't be scratched. Veronica, my older sister, fit their idea of perfection. She wore ambition like perfume, sharp and sweet, impossible to escape. Caleb, my brother, was the golden boy who said all the right things and made sure to be on the winning side of every argument. And then there was me, Quinn, the quiet one, the placeholder between their stories of success. When people ask why I never fought harder for their attention, I think of that birthday when I was 9. I'd painted them a lighthouse, tiny brushstrokes of white and blue that I thought captured how light could fight darkness. I still remember the smell of acrylic and the way my heart pounded as I handed it to my parents at the dinner table. My father barely looked at it before asking what Veronica had bought. She'd used her allowance to get a small crystal vase. Everyone clapped. My painting sat on the sideboard, forgotten under the glare of the chandelier. That was the first time I understood silence could swallow you whole. Years later, nothing had changed. At family dinners, I became background noise. Veronica's promotions, Caleb's new clients, my mother's charity events, those were the acceptable topics. Once I tried to share that I'd been volunteering at a community garden that just won a local grant. I got out 3 words before Veronica laughed and announced her new title at the bank. My father raised his glass. My mother asked about her new car. I sat there smiling, my excitement dissolving into the mashed potatoes I couldn't taste. People like to say time heals, but what it really does is harden. You stop expecting warmth. You start building walls. Mine were quiet and clean, just like my apartment. I worked in data numbers didn't judge, they just told the truth. After years of being dismissed, I found a strange comfort in algorithms. They didn't care who your parents favored. The only person who ever really saw me was my grandfather, Arthur Hale. He was gentle, always smelling faintly of pine and old paper. He used to say, "Kindness is not weakness, Quinn. It's just quieter power." Before he passed, he left me a small wooden box and a note. "For the kindest one, use it when they forget who you are." Inside was an old-fashioned key. I didn't understand it then, but I kept it close like a secret I wasn't ready to read. So when that freezing Tuesday morning came, when Mrs. Patterson called in tears because her heater was broken and the repairman wanted cash, I didn't hesitate. I promised her I'd help. I just needed to withdraw $150. Simple, right? That's what I thought until I walked into Glassview Bank and saw Veronica behind the glass walls smiling like she owned the world. The line at Glassview moved slowly, the air thick with the faint scent of disinfectant and static. I could see Veronica through the glass office wall, her heels clicking against the marble, her laughter ringing too loud the way it always did when she wanted people to notice her. She looked exactly like the version of success my parents worshipped, sleek bun designer suit, smile calibrated to impress. When our eyes met, her expression flickered, then settled into that familiar smirk, the one that said she still saw me as the family disappointment. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the counter and handed the teller my withdrawal slip. Before the girl could process it, Veronica glided over the scent of her perfume, arriving before she did. "Well, well," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't expect to see you here. What can we do for you today, Quinn?" Her tone made my skin prickle. "Just need to withdraw $150, I said quietly. She let out a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. $150. She leaned closer, lowering her voice but making sure everyone could still hear. "We don't really serve beggars here. Are you sure you even have that much in your account?" Laughter flickered from somewhere behind me. The teller's hands froze mid-air. I felt heat crawl up my neck, that same sting I'd felt 1,000 times before. Every dinner table humiliation, every dismissive glance condensed into this single moment. My lips parted, but no words came. For a second, I saw the 9-year-old version of myself again clutching that forgotten lighthouse painting. I saw my grandfather's kind eyes, and something inside me, something long buried, shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just nodded, turned, and walked out. The sound of the glass door closing behind me was soft, almost kind. Outside, the wind was sharp enough to hurt. I stood there on the frozen sidewalk, pulse thudding in my ears. Humiliation has a taste, metallic, cold, unforgettable. But under the shame was something new, a current, a clarity. As I started walking home, I thought about the wooden box, about the key that had never fit any lock I knew. Maybe it wasn't meant to. Maybe it was a reminder. And that was the moment the burn began, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that forges. That night, the quiet inside my apartment felt heavier than usual. The radiator hummed like it was the only thing brave enough to make a sound. I sat on my couch coat, still on hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had already gone cold. Humiliation lingered in my chest like smoke. I'd spent years trying to prove that kindness could survive in a family like mine, but kindness had limits. And that morning I'd reached them. I glanced toward the bookshelf where the small wooden box my grandfather left me sat tucked between 2 old finance manuals. The note inside had yellowed slightly over time. For the kindest one, use it when they forget who you are. I ran my thumb over the faded ink. He'd known this day would come, hadn't he? The day I'd need to remember that quiet didn't mean powerless. I placed the cup down, opened my laptop, and the glow of the screen washed the room in pale light. Most people knew me as a freelance data analyst, the woman who worked late for mid-level firms and sent polite emails. What no one knew was that I'd built something far bigger, a private fund run under the name Shell Code 7. It started as an experiment, a predictive algorithm I'd written years ago, something that could forecast market behavior with almost impossible precision. The numbers had grown quietly, exponentially, and now it wasn't a portfolio. It was an empire hidden behind a screen. My cursor blinked on the dashboard. $4.2 billion stared back at me in clean white font. Beneath it, a list of institutions managing those assets. One name stood out like a bruised Glassview Bank, my sister's bank. I leaned back, the air leaving my lungs in a single stunned exhale. The same woman who'd humiliated me for $150 worked for a company that existed because of my fund's capital. Every bonus she bragged about, every promotion built on money she didn't even know came from me. The decision didn't feel angry. It felt inevitable. I straightened, the shaking in my hands gone. At 3 a.m., I called my legal counsel and scheduled an emergency meeting with Glassview's regional director. Tomorrow, I'd walk back into that bank, not as the quiet sister they pitied, but as their largest client. Morning light cut through the fog as I walked back toward Glassview Bank. The same doors that had hissed shut on my humiliation now parted quietly for me. I'd chosen a navy dress, simple and neat, my hair pinned low, no armor except self-control. Mr. Linton, the regional director, was waiting near the entrance, nervous, his phone clutched like a lifeline. "Ms. Dove," he said, almost bowing. "It's an honor." I gave him a small nod. His voice trembled. "This way, please." Employees looked up as I passed. Yesterday, I was invisible. Today, every whisper followed me. Veronica was standing by her glass office, mid-conversation, smile fading when she saw me. Confusion first, then irritation. She started walking over, ready to dismiss me again. Then Mr. Linton stepped forward, eyes wide with worry. "Branch Manager Veronica Hale. This is Ms. Dove, representative of Shell Code 7. The name hit her like static. She blinked. Shell Code. What I didn't answer. "Mr.?" Linton gestured toward her office. "Let's talk inside." We entered the same room where she'd once laughed about beggars. The blinds reflected faint stripes of winter light across the table. I took the visitor's chair. Mr. Linton remained standing. Veronica hovered, arms folded tight. "What's this about?" she asked. I folded my hands calmly. Shell Code 7 has concerns about Glassview's management practices, specifically this branch. Mr. Linton jumped in before she could speak. We've been instructed to perform an immediate risk reassessment, Ms. Hale. Please listen carefully. Her eyes darted between us. I don't understand. You don't need to, I said quietly. It's already been decided. We're withdrawing all assets, $4.2 billion, effective immediately. Silence. The hum of the air vent was suddenly loud. Mr. Linton's face went white. All of it, yes. And per contract, our public reason will cite loss of confidence in local management. I met Veronica's eyes. Specifically, this branch's leadership. The words landed like a hammer. She blinked rapidly, then let out a shaky laugh. Wait, this is insane. You can't just Mr. Linton cut her off. Enough. His voice cracked. Do you have any idea what this means? The stock will crash. Investors will flee. I stayed still. Calm felt like power now. Veronica turned to me, recognition dawning, disbelief mixing with fear. You, she whispered, you're M. Dove. I gave her a small, sad smile. Yesterday, you wouldn't even let me withdraw $150. Today, you just lost $4 billion. Her face broke. The confident manager collapsed into someone I barely recognized, pleading, shaking mascara streaking down her cheeks. Quinn, please, don't do this. You'll ruin me. You'll ruin us. It was never about ruining anyone, I said. It's about respect. Mr. Linton cleared his throat, his tone icy. Ms. Hale, your employment is terminated effective immediately. 2 security officers stepped forward. She stumbled as they guided her out, still crying, still whispering my name. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. Revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like silence, finally settling where chaos used to live. But the story didn't end there. That evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls from my parents, texts from Caleb, even a desperate voicemail from my mother. What have you done? Think of the family. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay. It was always about them, the family brand, the image, the shame. So I sent one message to the group chat. Dinner at my place, Sunday, 7 p.m. Let's talk about the family. When Sunday came, they arrived expecting an apology. The address I'd sent led to a quiet street lined with cedar trees and a modern house they'd never seen before mine. I watched from the window as their expressions changed from confusion to greed. My father straightened his tie. My mother whispered something about finally living up to her potential. I opened the door. Welcome. Inside the table was set simply wood linen, soft light. Veronica was absent, of course. My mother's first words were, "You've made your point, Quinn, but this has gone too far. Your sister is devastated." My father chimed in stern, "Fix this mess. You've embarrassed us." Caleb, ever the peacemaker, smiled thinly. "Let's all calm down. We're family." I listened. 10 minutes of lectures about loyalty, image forgiveness. Not one word about the years they ignored me. Not one apology. When they finally stopped, I walked to the sideboard and brought out a thin leather folder. I placed it in front of my father. "If we're talking about family, we should start with honesty." He frowned, opening it. Bank statements, forged invoices, shell company filings, all with Caleb's and Veronica's names. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said softly, "of how you both borrowed from grandfather's trust fund. 2 years of withdrawals disguised as consulting fees. I was the executor, remember?" The room went still. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Caleb's voice cracked. "Quinn, you don't understand. I understand perfectly," I said. "You took what he built for all of us and turned it into a personal ATM. And when it ran out, you mocked the only person who still believed in decency." My father's eyes darkened as he read the totals. The numbers were undeniable. I stood my pulse steady. "You want me to fix the family's reputation? Fine. I'm fixing it right now by ending the business." My mother looked at me, voice breaking. "What do you mean?" "This family isn't a home," I said. "It's a corporation built on image and extraction. I'm liquidating my shares." No one spoke. The fireplace crackled softly behind me. Then I looked at them, each face stunned, each secret finally exposed, and added quietly, "Grandfather left me a note. Use it when they forget who you are." I think he meant this moment. I walked to the door, opened it, and let the cold air rush in. Dinner's over. They didn't follow me. Outside, the night was crisp, the stars pale and distant. Somewhere, I imagined my grandfather's steady voice, proud and calm. Justice hadn't come through rage, it had come through truth. Weeks passed, and the noise faded the way storms do slowly. Then, all at once, news spread about Glassview's internal audit about how both Veronica and Caleb were implicated in financial misconduct. My parents stopped calling after the first wave of headlines. Silence from them wasn't new, but for the first time, it didn't hurt. It just felt quiet. I moved through my days differently now. The house was mine, but it didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like space to breathe. Mornings began with coffee and sunlight instead of dread. My hands, once trembling with restraint, now felt steady. One afternoon, I stood in a small community garden behind the library, the one I'd helped fund years ago. A new plaque gleamed under the light, the Arthur Hale and Patterson Garden. Mrs. Patterson was there, bundled in her knitted scarf, laughing with children planting marigolds. She caught my eye and smiled a real, uncomplicated kind of warmth. I knelt beside her, pressing a seedling into the soil. The dirt was cool grounding. For years, I'd invested in systems that grew wealth. Now I was investing in something that grew life. The most valuable transfer I ever made wasn't money. It was my loyalty finally moved to where it belonged. I stayed there long after the sun dipped below the trees, watching the small leaves tremble in the wind. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't the quiet sister or the forgotten daughter. I was just Quinn, whole, steady, free. My grandfather's words echoed softly in my mind. Use it when they forget who you are. I finally understood. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a boundary drawn in silence. If you've ever had to walk away from people who never saw your worth, know this: you didn't lose them. You reclaimed yourself. Tell me your story in the comments, and if mine stayed with you, hit subscribe. There's more to come. My sister raised her glass and said, clear as daylight, "Where's your husband and kids?" "Oh, right, you don't have any." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it cut deep, my parents smiling like it was harmless fun. My fork frozen midair. I'd spent years paying their bills, saving their home, and now I was the punchline at their table. I set my spoon down, looked my sister dead in the eye, and said, "Where's your money?" "Oh, right, I've been supporting you." Until today. The room fell silent, but that silence didn't end the night it started everything that came after. What they did next crossed a line no family ever should. Before I tell you what that silence led to, tell me, where are you listening from? So I know I'm not the only one who's ever been laughed at by their own family. And when you've heard the rest of my story, tell me, what would you have done if you were sitting at that table? I'm Grace Whitaker, 32, a UX researcher living in Seattle's Capitol Hill. From the outside, my life looks steady, clean apartment, stable job, quiet mornings. But what most people don't see is where half my paycheck goes. It disappears into the same black hole it's gone into for years, my family. My mother, Linda, was a nurse until her heart surgery forced her into early retirement. My father, Thomas, used to teach economics before moving into consulting, which usually means waiting for calls that never come. And then there's my sister, Brooke, 4 years younger. Bright, charming, endlessly adored. She calls herself a fashion influencer, though what she really influences is my bank balance. Rent, credit cards, car repairs, her texts always start the same way. "Hey sis, can you help me just this once?" I used to tell myself that's what good daughters do. They keep the lights on the house from foreclosure, the family from falling apart. I thought that if I just kept giving one day, they'd see me as more than their backup plan. Every Sunday, I drive an hour south to Tacoma for family dinner. My mother insists it's tradition: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, something sweet at the end. The house still smells the same, like coffee and old wood polish. The photos on the wall are the same too, Brooke, in a white dress at her high school pageant, Dad shaking hands with someone important, Mom smiling in a hospital uniform. There isn't one photo of me alone. I'm always standing at the edge, half cropped out the reliable one who showed up late because she had to finish work first. I don't complain. I bring wine, I help clean up. I ask about their week. They talk about Brooke's latest partnership, about Dad's potential client, about Mom's pills being too expensive. When the meal ends, Dad pats my shoulder like a colleague, not a daughter, and says, "Thanks for keeping things steady." Some nights on the drive back to Seattle, I tell myself this is just how families are messy, imperfect, needy. Other nights I grip the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ache. Because deep down, I know it's not love that keeps me paying their bills. It's guilt, the kind they raised me on. That's why I didn't see the dinner last Sunday coming. I thought it would be like every other one small talk tension hidden under polite smiles. But that night, the air felt different, thick with something sharp and waiting. The kind of tension that makes even the silverware sound loud. That Sunday, the table looked the same as always. Chicken steaming in the center, a basket of rolls, wine glasses catching the amber light. But the warmth felt wrong, stretched too thin. My mother talked about Brooke's latest fashion event, how she'd been invited to a designer party in downtown Seattle. My father added something about great exposure and how proud we should be. I smiled, said all the right words, but my chest felt tight. Exposure didn't pay rent. Pride didn't erase the thousands I'd wired to keep her credit score alive. Brooke leaned back in her chair, phone in hand, scrolling as she half listened. Her laughter, sharp dismissive, broke through my silence. "You know, Grace, you should come to one of those events. Maybe you'd finally meet someone." She looked up with that grin that never reached her eyes. "Where's your husband and kids, anyway?" "Oh, right, you don't have any." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mom laughed. Soft, high-pitched, the kind she used when she wanted to smooth things over, but this time it carried something else. "Agreement," Dad chuckled too, shaking his head. "Don't tease your sister," he said lightly, but there was a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I felt the world narrow. The smell of roasted garlic, the ticking wall clock, the clink of silverware, they all blurred into a hum. I'd worked every holiday, skipped vacations, paid their debts. And this was what they saw when they looked at me, someone incomplete. A woman defined by what she didn't have. Brooke swirled her wine eyes, glinting. "I mean, you're doing fine, right? That tech job of yours, what is it you do again? Screens and surveys?" Her tone was sugary, cruel. "I just think you'd be happier if you had a life outside spreadsheets." My hand tightened around the spoon. I could feel the heat rising from my neck to my ears. For years, I'd let it slide, the jokes, the digs, the quiet expectations. But something broke, then something small but irreversible. I set my spoon down and looked straight at her. My voice came out calm, almost too calm. "Where's your money, Brooke?" I asked. "Oh, right, I've been supporting you." "Until today." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. The laughter stopped. My mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. My father's eyes darted between us, unsure whether to scold or stay silent. Brooke blinked, stunned. "Excuse me, you heard me," I said quietly. "I'm done." For the first time in years, no one interrupted me. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. That silence, it wasn't peace. It was the sound of something ending. When I drove back to Seattle that night, the silence in my car felt heavier than their stares. The road stretched ahead like a tunnel of headlights and rain. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar calm on the surface, but underneath something sharp had finally woken up. I didn't cry. I didn't replay their words. I just thought about everything I'd done, every transfer, every bill, every sacrifice that had built their comfort while shrinking mine. By the time I reached Capitol Hill, I knew I couldn't go back. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and went straight to my desk. The stack of envelopes was still there, bills, payment notices, receipts I'd never had the courage to total. I turned on my laptop and opened my bank account. Line after line, year after year, it stared back at me. Money to cover Brooke's tuition, Dad's mortgage, Mom's medication, the broken car, the new sofa, over $80,000 in 7 years. My chest tightened. I'd spent the best years of my life keeping everyone else afloat. The irony was brutal. I worked in fintech building tools to help people manage their money, while I couldn't manage to keep my own from bleeding away. That night, I hovered over the recurring transfer button I'd set up for my parents. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this transfer?" I clicked, yes. It was just one click, but it felt like cutting a cord that had strangled me for years. I sat back exhaling for what felt like the first time in forever. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before I'd even finished my coffee. Mom first. "Sweetheart, did something happen? The mortgage payment didn't go through," then Dad. "You forgot the house transfer," then Brooke. "Hey, can you Venmo me rent's due?" I read every message, every guilt-laced word, and put the phone face down. By evening, there were voicemails, Mom's voice trembling, Dad's angry, Brooke's half accusing, half begging. By the end of the week, the calls turned desperate. "You can't do this to your family. You owe us after all we've done. You're being dramatic." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I started saving everything, the messages, the bank logs, the receipts. Not out of spite, but because something inside me whispered that this wasn't over. Then came the text that confirmed it. "Come home Sunday. We need to talk." No greeting, no question, just an order. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My pulse slowed. If this was the war they wanted, I'd stop pretending I didn't know how to fight. "Fine," I whispered to myself. "Let's talk." Sunday came gray and cold. The drive down to Tacoma felt different this time. No guilt, no need to rehearse polite answers. Just a steady, deliberate calm. I parked in front of the house I'd spent years saving from foreclosure. The paint was peeling, the porch light still flickered, and the same curtains hung in the windows. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. When I stepped inside, the air felt heavy with tension and coffee. My mother was setting the table, her movements brisk, avoiding my eyes. My father sat at the head of the table like a judge, hands clasped. Brooke leaned against the counter, scrolling her phone, pretending not to care. "Grace," my mother said without looking up, "we can't live like this. The mortgage, the bills, you know how hard it is for us." I hung my coat over the chair. "I know. I've known for 7 years. Dad's tone was sharp. "Don't start. This family depends on you, and you've always helped. Why stop now?" I met his eyes. "Because it's not help if it's expected. That's called obligation." Mom dropped the napkin she was folding. "You're being cruel." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being honest." Brooke snorted, still looking at her phone. "Wow, someone's found their backbone. Congratulations, sis." I turned toward her. "You know what's funny? You mock me for not having a husband or kids, but you've lived off me like I'm your second parent." Her head jerked up. "Excuse me." Mom jumped in, flustered. "Enough, both of you. Brooke's still finding her footing. You can't expect her to be as responsible as you." My laugh came out dry. "That's exactly the problem. You never expected her to be." Dad slammed his hand on the table, the sound sharp as glass. "Watch your tone. We're your parents. Show some respect." I met his glare, steady and calm. Respect is earned, not demanded. He rose slightly as if to intimidate me, but I didn't move. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself could shatter. Then Brooke spoke again, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you're so much better because you make a little money. Please. Without us, you'd have no one." I took a breath. "That's the difference, Brooke. You need people to define you." "I don't." Her face twisted. "You're pathetic. You'll die alone with your spreadsheets." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but at least I'll die debt-free." Mom gasped. Dad muttered something under his breath and Brooke stormed toward me. "You selfish." Before she could finish, I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. The sound of paper hitting the table snapped her words in half. "What's that?" Dad demanded. "Records," I said. "Every payment I've made for this family since I started working, over $84,000. Tuition, mortgage, credit cards, repairs, even the new couch you're sitting on." Brooke rolled her eyes. "You're keeping score now." "No," I said evenly. "I'm keeping proof." Mom's voice shook. "Grace, that's not necessary." "It is," I cut in. "Because what happened after that dinner last week wasn't just a misunderstanding." Dad frowned. "What are you talking about?" I slid another sheet toward him, a printed notice with his signature. "This, the home equity loan you took out using my name." He stared, color draining from his face. "That's ridiculous." "Really?" "The bank disagrees." I pulled out another page stamped with an official seal. Forgery, identity theft, elder fraud, depending on how far I decide to go. Brooke froze, her eyes darting between us. You called the bank. I didn't just call, I said. I hired a lawyer, Rachel Tran. She's handling the case. Mom's hand flew to her chest. You brought in an outsider to turn against your own family. I looked at her steady. You stopped being my family when you used me like a wallet. You crossed a line when you signed my name. Dad leaned forward, voice low. You think you can threaten us? I didn't flinch. Not a threat, a timeline. You have 30 days to remove my name from every account and repay what you owe. If you don't, Rachel will file. The room went dead silent. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than ever. Brooke whispered, You wouldn't. Try me. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mom's tears began soft practiced. Sweetheart, we only did it to protect the house. You know your father's been struggling. We thought that I'd clean it up again, I said. You didn't think. You counted on it. Dad's face hardened. We're your parents. And I was your insurance policy, I replied. Not anymore. Brooke sank into her chair, eyes glassy. You're ruining us. I gathered the folder back into my arms. No, Brooke. I'm saving myself. As I turned toward the door, Mom's voice cracked behind me. Grace, please, we can fix this together. I paused at the doorway. I spent years fixing things you broke. This time, you'll fix it yourselves. Outside, the sky had turned the color of steel. I walked down the steps slowly, the cold air biting at my cheeks. Through the window, I could still see them. Mom crying. Dad pacing Brooke, staring blankly. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 2 weeks later, Rachel called. The investigation's complete, she said. The bank confirmed the forgery. Your name's cleared. You're no longer liable for any of their debt. For a second, I couldn't speak. Years of pressure dissolved in one breath. So, it's really over. Rachel's voice softened. Legally, yes. Emotionally, that's up to you. When I hung up, I stood by my apartment window watching the city lights shimmer on the water. I thought about everything I'd lost trying to earn their love and how letting go might be the only way to find peace. That night, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, for no reason poured a glass, and raised it to the skyline. To endings, to beginnings, to silence that finally meant peace. The news came quietly through a property listing online. The Tacoma house, the one I'd once saved from foreclosure, was up for sale. There it was on the screen, the peeling porch, the coffee-stained walls, a photo of the dining room where everything had fallen apart. A red tag at the bottom read, For sale. I didn't feel triumph, only inevitability. When you build a life on someone else's sacrifices, it always collapses eventually. A week later, Mom sent a message. One last dinner before we leave the house. Please come. I hesitated, then went, not out of guilt, out of closure. When I arrived, the rooms were stripped bare, boxes stacked high, the smell of dust replacing Sunday roast. My father looked older, his voice quieter. Brooke sat silently, phone face down for once. We ate without small talk, without pretending. Afterward, I finally spoke. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said, but I won't be your safety net anymore. If you fall, you get back up on your own. No one argued. For the first time, silence didn't feel like war. It felt like understanding. When I left, I paused at the doorway and looked back. The house that had held so many years of resentment seemed smaller now, almost fragile. Driving back to Seattle, I rolled down the window. The wind was cold, sharp, and clean. I thought of all the things I'd finally made room for: my own savings, my own peace, my own future. In the weeks that followed, I focused on work, took a promotion, and signed up for a night course I'd been putting off. My life was no longer divided into what they needed and what was left of me. It was mine again. Sometimes I still think about that night, the laughter, the silence, the line I finally drew. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice, that being the good daughter meant carrying everyone else. But real love doesn't drain you. It doesn't demand your peace as proof. Now, when I sit in my Seattle apartment and see the sun slide over the skyline, I don't feel bitterness, just calm. I learned that saying no isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while they tore you apart, I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're listening from and what line you had to draw. And if this story hit home, subscribe because there's more to tell.